Good afternoon, a warm welcome from Brussels. I would like to welcome you for our Destination 6 session this afternoon, which is on the resilient, inclusive, healthy and green rural, coastal and urban communities. And it's course with the same title for 2022. My name is Nicola Britta-Holzen. I'm the Deputy Head of Unit B2. That's the unit dealing with research and innovation in the Directorate General for Agriculture. Next slide, please. We would like to make this an interactive session, although we are unfortunately not all in one room. So we would like to invite you, the participants from all over the EU and beyond, to ask your questions on our presentations, and for that we would like to ask you to use the system called Slido. You see here there is a website where you should navigate to. Then you have to insert the identification of this meeting, that is this code starting with CL, or you can also simply scan the QR code which is published there. In order to facilitate for us to deal with your question, we would ask you to really always start your question by identifying the topic you are raising your question to. So please, for example, type first 05 and then type your question. It is also possible, if you have the feeling that there were already other participants who asked the same question you are interested in, that you just upvote the question and then it will rise higher in our priority list and you have a higher chance that this question will be replied to. So please, it's also for facilitating for our colleagues that there are not too many double questions. So thank you very much for that. The next slide, please. So the session will be dealt in two parts because you can see also that there are two different calls here. And both parts will be finished by a frequent question and answer session where we then use the Slido. But in case your question will not be replied to, you can also submit the question later to our research inquiry service, or you can contact your national contact point. So what is this session about? This is part of the cluster that looks into spatial, social, economic and behavioral aspects of the transition and how to generate benefits for all in order not to leave no one behind. This call is not subdivided like others into subheadings, but it has topics on 4 types of aspects. And these aspects are rural communities, coastal communities, urban communities, and in particular urban food environments, and also finally nature-based solutions. There are 2 calls this year. One which has a single stage with 5 topics. You can see them as bullet points. And then there is a second, which is a 2-stage call with 2 topics. So altogether, we come to 7 topics in total. What all these topics have in common is that they aim to empower actors to innovate and act for change, because this is the common feature. As you can see from the slide, there are 7 topics, and they touch upon the first call, which is Horizon Cluster 622, Community 01, that's the code. There we have boosting women-led innovation in farming and rural areas, the assessing and improving of labor conditions and healthy and safety at work in farming. Third, the integrating maritime ecosystem service valuation, conservation and restoration in socio-economic models. Then social innovation in food sharing to strengthen urban communities' food resilience, and assessing the socio-politics of nature-based solutions for more inclusive and resilient communities. And as said, there is a second call, which is a 2-stage one. You can see it there in green. And this one has 2 topics. The first one is empowering rural communities and smart villages to innovate for societal change, or smart solutions for smart rural communities, you can also call it. And the second is developing nature-based therapy for health and well-being, strengthening evidence about the diversity of rural areas and their challenges. The next slide, please. Now let's have a look at the intervention logic. And you can see there are three different columns on this. The first is the general policy context for this call, which is the Green Deal, like for the rest of the Cluster 6. But it's also strongly connected with many other priorities that need to be combined at local level in the different types of communities we are looking at. These include the strategies that derive from the European Green Deal, as already said, such as the Farm to Fork strategy, the biodiversity strategy, or the Zero Pollution Action Plan. Priorities that are more around social inclusion, demography, or democracy, such as the European Pillar of Social Rights, or the long-term vision for rural areas that has been adopted on 30th of June this year. Priorities on enabling technologies such as the Europe strategy for its digital future. Now let's look at the second column, which is the impact. So at a higher level, the Sustainable Development Goals are also part of the policy contexts that are the context of this call. The particular goal is the sustainable communities, to mention only one. So the impact indeed corresponds to the destination, which is resilient, inclusive, healthy and green rural, coastal and urban communities. This destination is the translation of one of the 6 targeted impacts identified for Cluster 6 in the strategic plan, which reads, rural, coastal and urban areas are developed in a sustainable, balanced and inclusive manner thanks to a better understanding of the environmental, socio-economic, behavioral and demographic drivers of change, as well as the deployment of digital, social and community-led innovations, as you can read it from the slide. So let's move on to the third column, which are the impacts. This call is expected to contribute to the 6 following impact areas of the Horizon Europe strategic plan. The first one is climate change mitigation and adaptation, continued by enhancing ecosystems and biodiversity on land and in water. Also, sustainable food systems from farm to fork. Remember, we have this farm to fork strategy. Good health and high-quality accessible healthcare, a resilient EU prepared for emerging threats, a competitive and secure data economy, and last but not least, inclusive growth and new job opportunities. So let's move on to the next slide, please, which is on the expected impacts. Proposals for topics under this destination should set out a credible pathway to contributing to resilient, inclusive, healthy and green rural, coastal and urban communities, and more specifically, one or several of the following expected impacts specified in the destination. So let's look together at the slide. The rural, coastal and urban areas are developed in a sustainable, balanced and inclusive manner. Rural, coastal and urban communities are empowered to act for change. They are better prepared to achieve climate neutrality, adapt to climate change, and turn digital and ecological transitions into increased resilience to various types of shocks. Good health and positive long-term prospects should be maintained, including jobs. And this should be true for all, including women, young people, and other vulnerable groups. Rural communities are equipped with innovative and smarter solutions that increase access to services, opportunities, and adequate innovation ecosystems. The sustainable development of coastal areas, including coastal protection and resilience, reaps the benefits of social, digital, and community-led innovations. Also, tourism, recreational and leisure activity development in natural and coastal areas respects long-term environmental carrying capacity and social goals. on urban and peri-urban communities, including the most vulnerable individuals and families. They should have access they should be able to afford and choose healthier, nutritious and environmental friendly food. So let's move on to the next slide. This is a very important slide because this is about the budget involved. So as you can see, we have allocated 75 million to these calls. So these are really important calls. Out of the 7 topics, when you look at the pie chart, you will see that there are 4 research and 3 innovation actions. Let's move on to the next slide, please. So thank you very much for your attention. And I would now like to move on to the individual presentations on the topics itself. And for this, I would like to ask you to have your attention to listen, as already said, to 2 series of topic presentations, first 5 and then 2 more. And after each of these series of topics, there will be an open question and answer session, and we will happily reply to your questions, which you have asked in Slido. And please, another reminder, please, before the question, put the number of the topic. So then I would like to move on to the first topic, please. And I would like to ask you to have your attention to listen to the first series of the 5 topics, which are from the single stage call. And then, as said, we will have the question and answer session afterwards. The first 2 topics are about rural areas, and they are presented by my colleague Alexia Ruby. The first one, so she's also from DG Agri, Unit B2, like me. The first one is about boosting women-led innovation, and the second one is about improving labor conditions and health and safety at work in farming. So please, Alexia, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Good afternoon to all. So the first topic is called indeed boosting women-led innovation in farming and rural areas. It's a research and innovation action. Next slide, please. So the policy context for this topic is so it addresses a mix of policy initiatives such as the Sustainable Development Goals, especially that of gender equality, but also the European Green Deal, the European Pillar of Social Rights, the EU Gender Equality Strategy, and the long-term vision for rural areas. So the European Commission has published this long-term vision for EU's rural area in June, and it states that by 2040, we want rural areas to be stronger, connected, resilient, and prosperous. And it pays attention to the role and needs of women that is often underestimated, and it introduces a flagship on research and innovation for rural communities, and also a flagship on social resilience and the role of women. So the idea is that of this topic is that the role of women as innovators is in particular largely underestimated and under-researched. When several reports, including from the European Court of Auditors, have highlighted their potential contribution to ecological transitions. And so we need to improve both the understanding of this role and adapt the supportive and enabling environment for women-led innovation to thrive. In terms of impact, to relate to the impacts that have just been presented, so the topic contributes to the main impact, the balanced, sustainable, and inclusive development of our European territory, and of rural territories in particular, and it seeks to empower rural people, in particular women, to act for change. What are the expected outcomes? They are that through the activities of this topic, we would have improved policies, strategies, and governance frameworks to boost women's role in innovating for sustainability in farming and rural areas. We would have an improved understanding of and recognition of women's role in the future of the farming sector and of rural economies. We would see a transformation of gender norms and stereotypes and a fostered gender equality. And we would see enhanced capacities of women to innovate for change, improved skills, solutions, networks, knowledge flows, and the dissemination of innovation support tools, especially those favoring ecological transitions. So if we can move on to the next slide, please. So to achieve the outcomes I just mentioned, we would like the project to explore the role of women as innovators and entrepreneurs in rural areas and farming today and in the future, considering the megatrends, highlighting country differences, or maybe, also inside countries. Analyze the specifics of women-led innovation. We know that there are, thanks to a pilot project we had internally. So analyze what are the specifics of women-led innovation in farming and rural communities, supporting and hindering factors, and met or unmet needs for support from the knowledge and innovation systems. We would like them also to support practical, user-centered, women-led interactive innovation initiatives to create and exchange knowledge on women-led innovation. We expect also the projects to benchmark EU and national policy and legal frameworks on farming and on rural development for gender and equality performance. And finally, we expect the project to formulate recommendations on how to improve these policy frameworks. The indicative budget is 6 million euros for the whole topic and 3 million per grant. We expect 2 projects to be funded. And the important points on which we can attract your attention is that this is a fully transdisciplinary topic. The social sciences are very important. It is a multi-actor topic as well. We expect women to be fully, and women organizations or representatives to be fully engaged in the work from the outset of the project planning and in the whole rollout. Social innovation is important too. We expect to see a wide variety of contexts covered, so in terms of countries or socioeconomic conditions. And there are a lot of collaborations to foresee between these projects and others that are planned under other calls, and these are mentioned in the topic text. So that was for the first topic. And now maybe we can move on to the second one, which is on assessing and improving labor conditions and health and safety at work in farming. So there, if we move on to the next slide as well, again, thank you. This topic sits also at the interface of many strategies. So the Farm to Fork strategy, social inclusion with the European Pillar of Social Rights, and health and safety as a policy domain. It is part of the flagship on research and innovation for rural communities of the long-term vision for rural areas that I just mentioned in the topic before. And the idea is that it's been observed that farming is a very risky and very demanding job with long hours and limited income that contributes to sometimes a low attractiveness or the perception of a low attractiveness of the job. And we want to understand these labor conditions better in order to sustain food security and prosper rural communities in the long term, because without these and without farmers, we cannot have food as well. So it's also a food security issue. In terms of impact, the topic contributes to a balanced, sustainable, inclusive development of our European territory and of rural territories in particular, and it seeks to empower rural people to act for change. The expected outcomes there is we expect an enhanced understanding and awareness of farm and farm workers' health and safety, and of the implications of perceptions of their work on the future of the sector and on food security. We expect improved policies and governance frameworks favoring safer, more inclusive working environments. We expect a wider use of corporate social responsibility by farm businesses. And we expect, as a result of all of this, improved health, safety, and labor conditions in farming. Next slide, please. So to achieve the outcomes I just mentioned, we would like the projects to analyze health and safety at work in the farming sector with a specific focus on working and labor conditions today and tomorrow, various types of labor contracts and workers, different genders, different ages. We would like also the projects to engage with farmers and farm workers on the perception of their jobs and future perspectives and attractiveness of the job. We expect them to analyze the impact of the type of labor force involved, so society, on society, on farm, the consequences of the different types of labor that we have in farming in terms of resilience to external shocks. We would like the project to explore the potential of corporate social responsibility and social economy to improve the situation, including business models that reward improved working conditions. We would like them to analyze also consumers' willingness to pay for more ethical products or products that are made in ways that are more inclusive and more respectful of good working conditions. And for that, we expect that they would support some small social innovation or corporate social responsibility pilots, and that they would explore the policy implications and make recommendations for improvement. We have budgeted €5 million for this topic, with only one project foreseen. It's a multi-actor project as well, and we expect engagement with the representatives and with farmer groups and farmer workers and unions, and so really discussing with them these implications. Social sciences is important. We also would like in this topic to have a variety of contexts explored, especially countries and sector with more mobile workers, be it workers from the EU or from outside the EU. And there are also a lot of collaborations to build between these projects and others, and that's clearly explained in the topic text too. So thank you very much for your attention, and over to Nicola Hosten. Thanks.
Excellent. Yeah. Thank you very much, Alexia. That were two very interesting presentations, especially on the second topic. I would like to just remind you that now we have in our new in the new CAP reform, we have also as a baseline requirements the social conditionality. So I think especially the second topic is really something very interesting, and we will look very closely on the results. So the next presentation, I would like to hand over then to our colleague Wendy Bonn. Wendy is working for the Directorate General of Research and Innovation. She is based in the Directorate B, which is called Healthy Planet, and more precisely in the unit B4, which is Healthy Oceans and Seas. And you can already guess from that her topic is dealing with coastal areas. And more precisely, it's about integrating marine ecosystem services, valuation, conservation, and restoration in socio-economic models. So please, Wendy, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much. As you already introduced the title, indeed, this is an innovation action, and this is building further or synergetically with a topic that was also introduced last year that was more research oriented, and this action is more innovation oriented. The next slide, please. So the setting of this topic is the same one as also last year. So the fact that coastal ecosystems play an important role in the several ecosystem services like nutrient recycling, regulation, sediment stabilization, transfer, food production, reducing risks and impacts of climate change, but at the same time, they're also a basis of important socioeconomic activities of a broad range. So this topic envisage to achieve a much better and fair integrated coastal zone management with better integration of ecosystem services, valuation, management, conservation, and restoration. In this topic, the places and the people matter. So this is very important. The Sustainable Development Goals are the very broad frame of this topic, and the European Green Deal, together with its ecological and digital aspects, is also a main focus. As expected outcomes, there are the nature-based and community-led socio-economic development in the coastal sector, and here also revitalizing social capacities in fragile communities is an important aspect also to take into account. So what we would like to achieve is a lasting cooperation between local communities and coastal sectors and authorities who could address better integration of the ecosystem services in socio-economic models. As this topic is also a multi-actor approach, So this means that also policymakers, the local communities and different actors should be included from the beginning of this project, the project setting and development. So it would also be important that the type of the socioeconomic models that would be used in the project, that they're also very well exchanged, let's say, with a multi-actor community that would be taken into account in this topic. So as a result, this project would also need to address scientifically validated, supported and monitored social innovation experiments for coastal areas, including innovative socioeconomic models implemented in coastal zone management. With an improved employment prospects, and in these improved employment prospects, this can also address specific jobs that do not exist yet or that could be proposed in the setting of the project. And then we're, for example, also thinking about regional local ambassadors for natural habitat restoration and transformation, who could also play a bigger role in the integrated coastal zone management in the future. This topic can address different sectors and also different challenges for the coasts, but it's very important to include among this variety of sectors the tourism development. So this is a clear expectation and outcome for this topic. And also the specific outcomes or the experiments or socioeconomic models that would be developed, it's also expected that they could be embedded in new regulations, so that specific outcomes of experiments or specific recommendations of use of socioeconomic models and how to integrate ecosystem services in that would also in the longer term end up in, let's say, that policymakers would need to follow. And the next slide, please. So the scope of this topic covers the developing partnerships and collaborations between a range of multi-sector organizations, authorities and coastal communities, and consider a multiple range of environmental and socio-economic challenges related to coastal areas. It needs to stimulate and benefit from increased nature connectedness of coastal communities. And to this extent, it could also take into account results from other projects like Horizon 2020 projects that have been funded before, or other national projects, of course. They would need to design, scientifically guide and develop nature-based coastal socioeconomic models, businesses and marine spatial planning issues based on the limits and potential of coastal ecosystem services. They need to include innovative business models, integrating land-based and sea-based production or service provisions, and to cover a representative set of coastal areas or regions across Europe, varying according to size and geographical, environmental, socioeconomic, institutional, and administrative conditions. And so on the long term, these long-lasting relationships between and within the case study areas benchmarked by the project could also be achieved in such a way. So I have already mentioned that the multi-actor approach is very important for this topic, and that the total is 9 million euros. So this would be covering all the different regional sea basins, so which we hope to combine in one very nice, successfully evaluated project. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Wendy, for presenting this topic. And with 9 million euros allocated budget, that's one of the bigger ones on coastal zone management, and very interesting, very complex subject. So thank you very much for that. Then we would like to move on to the presentation of Daniela Lüth, who will take us to urban communities. Daniela is also working for the Directorate General on Research and Innovation, also in this Directorate Be Healthy Planet. But she comes from the Unit B2, which is the unit dealing with bioeconomy and food systems. And her topic is also for sure associated to this, which is social innovation in food sharing and resilience of urban communities. So thank you very much, Daniela. We would like to listen to your presentation now.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. I will give a brief overview of the topic that was just outlined in Innovation Action. If we just move to the next slide. The topic on social innovation and food sharing to strengthen urban communities' food resilience. Definitely here the backbone is also the Green Deal, but also with recognizing that places and people matter to the achievement of a more sustainable Europe. And it's really that acknowledging that the Sustainable Development Goals and also the ecological and digital transitions brought forward by the European Green Deal and digital strategy bring challenges and opportunities that actually differ for different places and people. And we expect the topic to have three main outcomes. First of all, giving a better understanding of the concept of food sharing economy and of its impacts, as well as the drivers to its development and also any implementation gaps. And then also to help or to enable urban and peri-urban communities to develop, or if already there, to strengthen their food sharing economies, and really as a means to an end to more innovative, inclusive, sustainable and resilient local food systems and also supply chains. And lastly, of course, it's very, very closely linked also to the prevention and reduction of food waste. If we move to the next slide to have a look at how these expected outcomes are expected to be achieved. So what is the scope? When we look at the scope, it has become clear that especially with COVID-19, that the risk of disruptions of food systems needs to be given greater attention. So this is also a very timely topic. And that the strengthening the resilience of communities, in particular the most vulnerable and isolated, and those of risk of food poverty, that's really at the heart of this topic, to include those as well. And with acknowledging that urban food sharing is still an unexplored and debated field. So overall, we want the proposals or the topics to foster social innovation with a special focus on building a more widespread and resilient food sharing economy. And then engage in the following activities: mapping, tracking and monitoring. So building on the work of the EU-funded project Share City. In the outline, you also find a reference to that, and investigate the food sharing landscapes of at least 100 EU-associated country cities by automated systems. That might also include developing automated systems to search, collect and update existing urban initiatives. Secondly, to carry out a cost-benefit analysis, so define appropriate measures and indicators to assess the social, economic and environmental benefits of urban and peri-urban food sharing. That could also include developing new indices to describe the specificity of food sharing economy. As well as include a comparative governance analysis to investigate how different food sharing landscapes evolve and how to transform existing regimes to promote sustainable food sharing. And also provide a strategic planning, so to exploit the potential for scalability of existing food sharing initiatives and really bring innovation into urban food systems design, and build urban food systems of the future. And lastly, challenging the existing theories with also including studying the relationship between the evolution of social norms, culture and local conditions. This topic is a multi-actor approach to ensure also strong involvement of citizens and other stakeholders. It should address inequalities in urban food systems, including social categories and gender. It's an SSH discipline, and if feasible, also should these topics should collaborate with other proposals. It's a 10 million euro project, and we will fund one of this kind. And with that one, I hand over. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Daniela, for this really interesting presentation, which is about food security, and we all know that this was one of the ideals our founding fathers had in mind when they started with this European project, and I think it's very important that we continue this today. So we are coming now to the last topic in this first cluster, and that will be presented to us by Thiago Freitags. Thiago is also joining us from the Director General of Research and Innovation, also from this Healthy Planet Directorate B, and he is from the Unit B3, Climate and Planetary Boundaries. And his presentation is about sociopolitics of nature-based solutions, and I'm really looking forward to the presentation. Thiago, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and good afternoon, everyone. So this is a research and innovation action on the sociopolitics of nature-based solutions in view of more inclusive and resilient communities. So on the next slide, we can see the policy context of this topic. As many of you already probably know, nature-based solutions contribute to the EU biodiversity strategy for 2030, but also to other Green Deal priorities through the provision of key ecosystem services. And here I would like also to mention the new EU adaptation strategy, where nature-based solutions are very visible. However, the available approaches, they seem inadequate to fully take into consideration both the synergies and the trade-offs among different actions, notably when concerns the social and cultural benefits of nature-based solutions. I would also like to emphasize that given the current portfolio of projects and the experience that we have gained with Horizon 2020, there are still NBS implementation issues across different kinds of ecosystems and challenges addressed. And these issues hinder NBS uptake and upscaling. So there is a need to develop our understanding of the economic, the social, political, moral, and cultural dimensions of designing and implementing NBS, and not just the ecological and economic ones. So as for the expected outcomes, the first one is enhanced contribution of nature-based solutions to social and economic targets, especially in vulnerable communities. And indeed here how to make sure that these communities that are often left behind, they can be active partners and actors, real actors in the development of these solutions. The second one is that nature-based solutions governance models and co-creation approaches and tools are better suited, as well as new NBS design and technologies that can enhance the social benefits while at the same time providing ecological and economic benefits. Finally, it's very important to make sure that nature-based solutions are suited to respond to the different socioeconomic and political contexts in the EU and have higher applicability in the diverse contexts across Europe. So on the next slide, you will find the scope of this topic. So proposals should investigate how different nature-based solutions designs and governance can contribute to environmental justice, at the same time prevent environmental racism and gentrification, or ensure the inclusion and active participation of women, youth, or minority groups. The proposals should also develop innovative governance models, for instance, exploring different forms of engagement, inclusion, or stewardship, or enabling the breaking of silos in public administration and between different administrative domains. This is very important because one of the great obstacles for the further development of nature-based solutions is the continued work in silos of both academic communities and also administrative communities when you try to implement in the field these solutions. Another important component is that proposals should develop solutions to functional conflicts in land use for better and more integration between nature-based solutions, land use planning, and other sectors. Also, they should develop approaches based on citizen science to better communicate the science of nature-based solutions and promote citizen engagement. They should also gain a wider understanding on how the meanings and values attached to nature affect the long-term success of NBS. And related to this, the impact of citizens' perceptions and expectations towards nature-based solutions on the management decisions and delivery of ecosystem services. So here highlighting a crucial factor of culture and perceptions, and meanings and values of nature that are very important for us to understand and to really deliver on nature-based solutions. You can find many other and further details in the topic text. The indicative budget for this topic is 6 million euros per project, and 2 projects may be financed here. It's important here to emphasize that we expect collaboration with other NBS projects, both in Horizon 2020 and Horizon Europe. A few of those projects are already mentioned in the topic text. I would also like to emphasize that the existing portfolio of NBS projects, they gather together in task forces where they discuss issues of common interest for greater EU added value. And this is also mentioned in the topic text, that the projects should participate actively in these task forces. Again, this topic is very much oriented around the social sciences and humanities, so this is crucial here that these are well included. And finally, the outputs of the projects should be visible on OPLA, which is the EU repository of nature-based solutions. Thank you, it's all from me now.
Thank you very much, Tiago, for this very interesting presentation on nature-based solutions. And with this 5th presentation, we are actually coming to the end of the first round for this for the first call. So now we would like to have our first question and answer session, and you can see again the informations on the Slido system. And with this, I would like to hand over to Maria Jose, who's dealing with the Slido and who's taking care of your questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nicola. So we have a few questions for some of the topics. We start with the topic 012 and Alexia. What do you mean with the wide range of geographic contexts and diversity to be involved? As full stakeholders or as main beneficiaries of the project activities?
Thank you for the question. So this topic is the one on labor and working conditions. I think it's good to recall, beside the number, what we are talking about. The exact text of the topic is proposals should cover a representative variety of countries and sectors, at least in the EU, covering in particular countries and sectors in which intra-EU and non-EU mobile workers are a significant part of the sector's labor force. So that's the exact sentence, and up to you to interpret what it means. They need to be covered in the research that is taken, and as the project is multi-actor, it may be difficult to do it completely from outside. But we want this diversity of conditions to be addressed in the research. So I don't know if that answers, because your question as full stakeholders or as main beneficiaries of the project activities. For us in the framework of a multi-actor project, we need to have this variety represented in the consortium as well. Now, you're not necessarily going to have partners of all types in all countries. That would make too big a consortium, but we need to see the capacity of the consortium to address this diversity in the way it's organized, both in terms of multiplicity of competence and in terms of the object that will not look at only one country or two, but will cover the different types of things that we can find on the EU territory with regard to the context of the topic. Thank you.
Thank you, Alexia. So then we go for a question for Tiago and the nature-based solutions topic. Could you develop the contribution of nature-based solutions to the new European Bauhaus that is expected by the topic?
Yes, thank you. This is a very interesting question that I often hear about this topic. Indeed, when the topic was being, when it was created and co-created, there was this new launch of the new European Bauhaus initiative, and we thought that it would be very interesting here to create a link with this initiative. Bauhaus to be considered by the proposals. This means approaches that can be foreseen in this proposal. So it doesn't mean that there should be a direct link, a direct connection with the initiative itself, but that the philosophy behind it is considered also, as this topic is pretty much oriented around co-creation, the inclusion of different actors, of youth, of culture, and so on. So this was the idea behind it.
Thank you, Tiago. So then the next question is for Wendy and the marine ecosystems topic. Given the strong emphasis on EU's directives targeting the EU territory, is this call focused on rural communities within the EU?
Thank you. So this call is focused on the coastal communities as part of the rural communities within the EU. And so the EU directives, they apply to the entire EU area of coastal areas. But of course, probably most of the work has been done for more, let's say, densely populated coastal areas. So in this topic, we would also like to expect the proposers to sufficiently address also the rural coastal areas as an integrated part in the proposal.
Thank you, Wendy. So the next question is again for Tiago on the topic 0105. Could you please explain why are specifically encouraged international partners from the US, Latin America, or the Caribbean encouraged to apply to this, as distinct from other regions that are not mentioned in the topic text?
Yes, exactly. In fact, everyone can participate. So partners from other geographical regions can participate. We just decided to explicitly mention these as examples because we have a portfolio of NBS projects where we already had very good experiences with these regions, and we understand that the issues that this topic tries to tackle could gain a lot of insights from these from the experience that have happened in these regions. And here I would like to emphasize that this is not only European research and innovation telling Latin America how to do things, but also how we can learn from their experiences, which are very, very insightful and very diverse. And this is why we thought we would gain more diversity of situations. And also when we think of the issue of meanings and values attached to nature, what people perceive as nature or nature-based solutions, it would be very welcome to have other views from different contexts, not only the European Union. But again, I encourage all partners from all regions of the world to participate in this topic.
Thank you, Tiago, and you remain in the spotlight as the next question is also for this topic. Do you expect that the selected projects will implement new nature-based solutions, or is it more about providing input to policies and governance?
Yes, so this is not really an innovation action, so we are not here emphasizing on demonstration as we are in many other NBS projects of the NBS portfolio in Horizon 2020. However, we do leave it open to the proposals to decide if they want to implement small-scale pilots to explore NBS in their functional scope, socioeconomic reach, integrative approaches, or application in new settings. So this is written in the topic. So it's up to the proposals to decide if they can and if they want to do this, and if this is relevant for their challenge that they are addressing and the impact that they want to have. So this is very important. important. Although the project is a research innovation action, which aims primarily to understand the sociocultural context and the interplay between these factors and the effectiveness of nature-based solutions and the inclusion of different social groups. So we still think that there is a margin for people to try to implement these small-scale pilots. So this is written in the topic text and is not mandatory.
Thank you, Tiago. And then the next question also for you. Do both urban, coastal and rural communities need to be covered? And if so, do you expect that stakeholders from these three types of communities are involved in the successful projects and in the proposals?
Yes. So we do not from the outset define what should be the contribution of each of these communities. What we really want to emphasize here is not to cover only one, because we have had in the past, in the current portfolio of Horizon 2020 NBS projects, there is a strong emphasis on urban. And we wanted to avoid again this here. So we wanted to ensure that there is a diversity of communities being analyzed, and this is important also because people in different contexts have different perceptions and views about nature and about nature-based solutions, and this is very different from a rural community to an urban community. So it's very important here for the topic to have a variety of communities here, although we do not say, and I'm not going to say if we want one or two from each, or this is up to the consortia then to decide what is more relevant, what makes more sense, what can provide more impact, and also here not to remain in these silos of kinds of communities, because nature-based solutions can go through the interface between these different communities, from urban to peri-urban to rural, especially when we're talking about a watershed, a river basin, or things like that, wider ecosystems and wider ecosystem services. So sometimes the scale is not really just on the urban, but goes beyond that. So then it's up to the consortia, depending on the challenges they are addressing and the communities they want to address, to decide how many of each one or where exactly they are going to place their analysis.
Thank you, Tiago. So then the next question is for Wendy and the Marine Ecosystem Service topic. Does the successful project need to include the three different areas? If yes, which could this be?
Thank you. The text in the topic text is as such: the proposal should cover a representative set of coastal areas or regions across Europe, varying according to size and geographical, environmental, socioeconomic, institutional, and administrative conditions. So regional, interregional, macro-region, cross-border. And we have indeed several regional sea basins in Europe, so an expectation would indeed be to cover them at least. And yeah, there is not a preset number of 3 or 5 or 6 areas, but it would need to be clear from the proposal that the most significant different areas, that they are covered. So I think it would be rather difficult to do that with 3, but it's up to the proposals to make the best proposition on this.
Okay, thank you, Wendy. And then we have one last question for, no, maybe more, but at least one more for Tiago. Can the project include the assessment and redesign of existing nature-based solutions?
Yes, I believe so. While we do not specifically mention what we are expecting from proposals in the topic text, and again, this is up to the proposal to decide, but when we are assessing the sociopolitics of nature-based solutions in the research and innovation action, you can indeed assess how nature-based solutions have been implemented in past projects or in another initiative, and try to understanding of the sociocultural dynamics surrounding those solutions that have already been implemented. So it's up to the proposals to decide if they do this. And here I would also like to emphasize that the negative cases are also good. So good case studies are always welcome, but the negative case studies are always good for us to understand what didn't run as good as well as we were expecting, what were the issues and obstacles that were faced in the ground. So this pretty much can be part of the proposals. But again, I'll leave it to the proposals to decide exactly where and how they want to do this sort of assessment.
Thank you. And then this last question that we have for now, at least, also for the nature-based solutions topic, Tiago, could you please indicate what is environmental racism, or give maybe a definition of what you expect to see?
Well, there could be a whole lecture on this, and I'm certainly not the best qualified academic to address this question. But indeed, the question here is to make sure that nature-based solutions do not contribute to gentrification, for instance, in cities, and that the access to the ecosystem services people can get from nature-based solutions are not restricted to certain social groups that are generally more well off. We have many studies in geography and in other social sciences indicating that we face not only environmental crisis, but also segmented crisis affecting disproportionately certain segments of the society because they are either have less lower salaries, or they live in areas, in districts that are far away from green areas, so they do not have the same benefits from nature-based solutions. And the idea here is to make sure that when you co-design, co-create a nature-based solution, you involve all these people, the community, and especially in most vulnerable communities, you discuss with them what you mean with nature, what they want from nature and from nature-based solutions. You try to understand their point of view, and you try to make sure that the solutions that are going to be implemented do not further contribute to their isolation and to their and for them to have a greater access to these benefits that the solutions may provide. So there is a wide literature on this, and if you want to include this question through the Research Inquiry Service, I'm happy to provide you with a few references.
Okay, thank you, Tiago. So I think for the first session, these were all the questions we have. So Nicola, back to you.
Thank you very much, Marie-José. Yeah, that was very interesting to listen to the questions, and I'm afraid Tiago will continue to be a little bit in the spotlight, as you said, because he will have another topic to present. So we are now moving on to the second call for this Destination 6 of the Horizon Europe, and that is the two-stage call. So here we will have two presentations because there are two topics actually. And after those two topics, we will have again a final question and answer session through Slido. And I saw you are all very well listening to our request to always indicate the number of the topic first, and then you ask your question then. So thank you very much for that. That is extremely helpful for the colleagues dealing with your questions. So the first topic in this call is presented again by my colleague Alexia, whom you already met for the first and the second topic, and it is about smart solutions for smart rural communities. So thank you very much. The floor is yours, Alexia.
Thank you, Nicola. So the full title of the topic is Smart Solutions for Smart Rural Communities, Empowering Rural Communities and Smart Villages to Innovate for Societal Change. It's an innovation action, so we're getting closer to application there. Next slide, please. The topic addresses a mix of policy objectives at the interface of the European Green Deal, the European Digital Strategy, the European Pillar of Social Rights, and the EU Long-Term Vision for Rural Areas again. So the communication on this vision that was published in June sees rural areas as stronger, connected, resilient and prosperous by 2040, and it recognizes the central role that innovation has to play in solving rural challenges and enabling rural areas to fully contribute to the green and digital transitions that would be fair and leave no one behind. And for that, we need to develop digital, social and community-led innovations and smarter solutions that will raise rural areas' attractiveness. And this rural vision, as I said already, includes a flagship on research and innovation by and for rural communities, and this topic is part of this flagship. In terms of impact, this topic contributes to a balanced, sustainable and inclusive development of our European territory and of rural territories in particular, and it seeks to empower rural people to act for change. In terms of outcomes, we expect that the 2 projects that will be funded will enhance capacities of rural actors to innovate and strengthen human and social capital. We expect that they would enlarge the set of solutions that are available by developing practical and transferable solutions in a variety of domains and contexts. And we expect them to upgrade approaches, methods and tools and skills for community-led innovation, with, in fine, the objective to improve well-being, resilience to shocks, and contributions to the global goals to local action, so sustainable development goals in particular. Next slide, please. So this is an innovation action, as I said, and we expect practical innovations here. So to answer the outcomes, we would like the projects to support a large number of rural community-led social innovation or smart village pilot initiatives in a varied set of social and geographical contexts. In these pilots, we expect projects to prototype, test, and, well, pilot and demonstrate innovations that answer the needs of rural people, especially social and environmental needs. We are talking here about various forms of innovation, technical, technological, but also social innovation. Projects are welcome to exploit the potential of digital technologies, but this is not the absolute core of the topic. Yeah? So we already have 2 projects running on digital platforms for rural services, for example, and the project should make sure to avoid duplication there. So it's not the type of focus we're looking for. We have opened the possibility to provide financial support to third parties as an option. It's not mandatory, it's an option if the consortium would find this interesting for them. So how to select these pilots to support? Well, first you should build on the existing preparatory actions on smart villages and see what is their state of play, and consider well-being, resilience and replicability or transferability as important factors, transferability to villages that are with similar conditions, for example. And last but not least, we expect proposals to capitalize lessons learned while facilitating innovation on the ground and suggesting policy improvement. So to finish, I draw your attention to some points. So first, this is about rural communities in the broad sense. The proposals that would address only one sector would not be considered satisfactory. So the topic text says enough that the project should cover a wide variety of a wide range of things that impact the life of rural people. It will be important for this project to collaborate with others supporting social innovation in rural areas that are listed in the topic text. We expect there a real capacity to engage with rural communities and real experience from the consortium in facilitating this type of process, well demonstrated experience. And the topic obviously is a multi-actor topic where we want to have this real genuine engagement of the rural actors from the beginning of the project. And it's also a very strong topic on social sciences and humanities and social innovation. And for that, we have allocated 14 million euros, so it's a big budget, but there are a lot of issues at stake. And we would fund 2 projects, as I said earlier, 7 million euros each. Thank you very much for your attention. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Alexia, for this very interesting, more innovation-bended presentation. And yeah, just to remind you, it's also here an important budget. It's 14 million euros in total for 2 topics. So definitely something worth to reflect on if this would be something for you to contribute to. So then we have another presentation left, which will be the last one for the last topic. And this will be again presented by our colleague Thiago. And this time it's about developing nature-based therapy for health and well-being. And it sounds extremely interesting. So the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, and hi everyone again. So this is a research and innovation action on nature-based therapy for health and well-being. On the next slide, we can see the policy context of this topic. Again, as the other topic that I've presented before, many of you probably already know that nature-based solutions contribute to the EU biodiversity strategy for 2030 and other Green Deal priorities through the provision of key ecosystem services. And among the many benefits that nature-based solutions can provide, human health and well-being is gaining greater attention, and especially now following the COVID-19 crisis. However, despite the indication of positive correlations between nature and health and well-being, the causal understanding of relationships between health and nature exposure are not well understood yet. So this is why we thought of this topic, and we expect with it to gain a sharper view of green space management, nature protection, and semi-natural ecosystems like in agriculture or forestry as care providers and their possible linkages with the healthcare, social, and educational sectors. We also expect to get a stronger evidence base for the causal relationships between nature and health and well-being. Cost-effective nature therapy prescriptions are more widely used in the healthcare sector. Greater citizen and policymaker awareness of the positive benefits of nature for health and well-being. And finally, a wider utilization by the healthcare professionals and citizens of nature therapy as a form of preventive medicine. So on the next slide, we can see the scope of the topic. So proposals should develop first a common framework to recognize and promote contact with nature as a cost-effective response for the prevention and treatment of human health and well-being. They should include different stakeholders from the healthcare sector, landowners, as well as green space management and nature protection sectors. They should improve schemes monitoring nature health linkages and tools for the healthcare sector, green space management, nature protection, urban planning, and landscape architecture. They should develop prospective methods, experiments, or well-controlled interventions to provide more evidence of the causal relationships between nature and health and well-being. They should also test nature therapy sessions and develop the necessary tools and guidelines for their integration in public health. And they should identify legal and administrative arrangements, partnerships, and financial mechanisms for nature therapy sessions. I encourage you to read the text for further details, and the indicative budget is 6 million euro per project, and up to 3 projects may be financed here. It's important here to mention again that the projects are expected to collaborate with other NBS projects in Horizon 2020 and Horizon Europe and the respective task forces, where projects get together around themes of common interest for greater EU added value. Here also the role of social sciences and humanities is emphasized, and finally the outputs of the projects should be visible on OPLA, the EU repository on nature-based solutions. So this is all from me now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Thiago. Again, a very interesting presentation, I must say, and many new aspects to consider. So definitely also something we hope we will have interesting contributions from the audience. So this was now the second and last topic under this second batch we were dealing with. So again, we would like to have with you a question and answer session via Slido. And I would like to hand over again to Maria José. Thank you very much.
So thank you very much. And we start again with Tiago and some nature-based solutions related questions for now for the two-stage topic. So the first question is if it is expected to have international collaboration with all the three areas that are mentioned, the US, Japan, and Latin America, or just maybe one or two of them?
No, it's not expected to have international collaboration with all three areas. These three areas are mentioned, are suggested as areas for international collaboration, but we do not expect a certain amount of participation from each of these areas. So it's up to the proposals to the consortia to decide what is more relevant given their the challenges they are analyzing and what they want to achieve and what the impact they want to get from it. So yes, be aware that there is no expectation here regarding the exact number of partners from each of those regions.
So, and then maybe a follow-up question on the one that you just answered. What are the funding conditions for these international partners?
Well, for Japan, US, and some of Latin America, and here I include Brazil, Uruguay, Paraguay, no, sorry, Brazil, Uruguay, Panama, and Chile. They cannot receive funding from Horizon Europe. All the other countries from Latin America can. Because Japan, US, and these Latin American countries that I mentioned are considered high-income countries. So participants from those countries, they should participate with their own funding through, for instance, their research funding agencies. But however, there are exceptions, and I invite the consortia to read the rules regarding international participation, because there may be some exceptions there, but it depends. So the general question is no for Japan, US, and those countries from Latin America that I mentioned. For the rest of Latin America and Caribbean, yes, they can get funding directly from Horizon Europe.
Thank you, Tiago. Another question for you. Is there any connection with Cluster 1 Health that should be included already at the proposal level? And if yes, any specific protocol that should be followed?
No, at the moment there is nothing in that sense, in that regard. What we believe could be useful is if you have specific questions on health-related issues and protocols, you should send it through the Research Inquiry Service, and then we can check this with our colleagues from Cluster 1. So this could be very helpful, and maybe we could have a frequently asked question afterwards available for everyone to see exactly how to follow the procedures. But for the moment, there is nothing prepared in that regard.
Okay, thank you. So then the next question is to Alexia and the Smart Rural topic. Does the support to third party mean cascade funding? And is there any rule regarding if it's a single partner to manage that budget or if it can be allocated to the communities?
It is the same thing than cascade funding. Cascade funding is a sort of colloquial term to refer to financial support to third parties. I don't think there are rules that would force only one partner to manage the budget, but it needs to be managed by the consortium. So I don't necessarily understand what you mean by can it be allocated to the communities. And there we have opened it mostly for SMEs, or if the consortium needs to support partners to develop specific solutions or things like that. So you can do an open call in that case. So these are the general rules of financial support to third parties apply to this topic. And again, it's an option. So if the consortium finds it too complicated, it's not mandatory.
Thank you, Alexia. And then the question that we have now last for Tiago, at least for the moment, under the NBS topic, is it possible to use existing nature-based solutions?
Yes, indeed. And as with the previous topic on nature-based solutions, we do not set from the outset what sort of nature-based solutions should be analyzed if there is scope for the creation of nature-based solutions with the topic. So we leave it open to the consortium to decide. But indeed, there are many nature-based solutions implemented in many places. So there is plenty of possibilities to actually do this sort of analysis and try to gain a wider understanding of the causal relationship between the exposure of certain social groups to nature in these contexts. So you can indeed use existing nature-based solutions, but it's also open if you want to create your own nature-based solution with a limited budget for the project. So it's up to the consortium to decide. There are many different kinds of nature-based solutions that can be envisioned here, from green parks and other areas in urban areas to therapy gardens connected to healthcare institutions. So there's a lot here that you can envision, and there is a lot of ongoing nature-based solutions where you can do your analysis. So yes, indeed, you can use existing NBS. We do not say in the topic how exactly to do that, so it's up to you to decide if you want to do this.
So I can see that there are still a few more questions in preparation, so maybe we just give 1 or 2 minutes for everyone to submit their questions. So we have another question for Alexia. Does the large number of initiatives mean a limited number of selected communities, pilots, can be the playground for more than one initiative?
I think when we say a large number, I know it's a confusing word, potentially. What does large mean? But it's really, we want to see a certain coverage of a number of areas. So if you pick 3 areas, even if they cover different fields, then we would not have the impression that the project is touching a big enough number of communities. So there's a big demand for accompaniment of innovation in this community. So large means also different communities. That's the interpretation that I would give today. But of course, the text is what it is. But that's what we understand. Thanks.
Thank you, Alexia. And then we have another question for Tiago and the nature-based solutions topic. Expected evidence for causal relationship between nature and health and well-being requires longer time span to be able to assess it. Any comments on this?
This is absolutely true. It's one of the issues regarding this the establishment of these causal relationships and the development of knowledge in this area. We understand that with the time frame of this of the projects, it won't be possible to gain as much as possible these causal relationships as we would like to, but we expect the projects to at least to prepare and develop the methodologies and establish the analysis so that there could be some monitoring throughout the years, and even if you do not have a great evidence by the end of the project, you can have afterwards. So the idea here is also to lay the ground for these experiments and for these nature-based therapies to be further considered by the health sector, and also to create this framework where nature-based therapy is included in the health sector. So we understand this, and this is a setback, and this is something that needs to be tackled and needs to be decided by the consortia how exactly to tackle this in the best possible way.
Thank you, Tiago. I think you also answered the next question that was on the same topic. So we've answered all the questions that we have received so far. So Nicola, back to you.
Thank you very much, Marie-José. So that would be now us leading to the end of this session, and it would be for me to say thank you to all the speakers, Alexia, Wendy, Daniela, and Thiago, for their very interesting presentations, and really, I think, raising a lot of attention and interests in the 7 topics of our 2 calls. And I would also like to use the opportunity to thank to the colleagues from RIA who organized everything and made it possible with the technique and everything. And also, last but not least, also a thank you to you, the audience, for attending the session and also asking all the interesting questions, which we take as an interest in our topics and our calls. Some of the questions, for example, the one how the nature-based therapies is linked to the cluster 1 on health, was pretty precise already. So here I would already encourage you again to remember that we have our research inquiry service. So if you have more questions, please contact the colleagues there. And also, in case afterwards you just have another question which we didn't reply to, please also address yourself to the research inquiry service, and they will try to supply you with a good answer in writing. You would then. And also, we will include the most relevant or probably repetitive questions in our frequent question and answer session. So thank you very much again for listening and participating, and I would like to wish you good luck and a lot of success with the preparation of your proposals for our calls, respectively the topics you are interested in. Thank you very much and have a nice afternoon. Bye-bye.